Okay, in part 2 of the picture frame, we are going to dimension our stock in the thickness planer, rip it to the final dimension, mark the top, and talk about the gotchas that can sneak up on you if you don't carefully mark your surfaces. We're going to cut the rabbit where we start to care about 2 precise dimensions at the same time. We're going to use this cool magnetic feather board that my friend Kurt showed me to rip the bevels. We're going to test cut and measure the angle of our miter saw to confirm that it is exactly 45 degrees. And we are going to gang cut the pairs of rails for the picture frame to ensure that they are exactly the same length. We might even have time to try out this cool spline jig that my student Max put together following the plan by Michael Ohm. So let's get started. Find the planer and get it hooked up to the dust collection system. A key detail is that this gate is open so that the dust collector can actually draw air into it. Then connect the snurgly hose and get the rest of it positioned such that it's clear of the dimensioning handle and the bed. Then take your stock with the rough face on top and imagine its journey through the planer. Start on the infeed side of the planer and travel through to the outfeed side. Now look at the flat plane that you carefully made on the jointer and imagine how this flat plane is going to lie against the bed of the planer. The flatness of that initial plane is what allows the planer to not only cut off the rough material, but to do so in a way that makes it parallel to your initial surface. Okay, last critical detail here. Put your stock on top of the planer. See how it comfortably bridges from this one chrome plate to the other? Use those as an absolute bare minimum length of material that you're ever going to try to send through the planer. Any shorter and it's just not safe because look at what's happening underneath. You're going to send your material into the planer on the infeed table. And now I've lifted the planer up really high so that you can see, but just imagine that my piece here floating in the air is really resting on the table. And from your point of view, all you're going to see as you start to feed your material in is this gauge start to wiggle up just a little bit. What's happening there is your material is pushing this roller wheel up on the z-axis. At that moment, the spring-loaded roller wheel is going to grab onto your material and start pulling it into the machine. At that point, you should let go and allow the machine to do the rest until it comes out the other side on the outfeed table. After a couple inches, what you're going to hear is the sound of the blade starting to engage your material. And from your point of view as the operator, you're not going to see anything, you're just going to hear the difference in sound. If you do see something like a bunch of wood chips spewing out of the machine, you have forgotten to turn on the dust collector, and it's critical that the dust collector is on for this tool to function properly. The next thing that's going to happen is your material is going to arrive at the second roller. You're not going to hear or see any change here, just know that it's happening and that it's important, because the next event is the end of your material coming off the first roller. At this moment in time, the only thing keeping your material from flying out of the mill as the cutter blade swoops down into it is the second roller. This is why it's so important that your material be long enough. It has to get from the first to the second before it falls off the first. Let's power it up to see it in action. The rollers spin one way, the blade spins the other. You shouldn't have to push it or pull it at any stage in the process. If you feel like you need to push or pull your material for it to travel through, please let somebody know. The rollers might need to be cleaned. Okay, let's plug it in. We've got a bunch of these ceiling-mounted extension cords in the shop, and they were confounding to me the first time I tried to use them. Listen to the clue. Do you hear those clicky moments? All you've got to do as you pull the extension cord down is enter the clicky moment and then pull slowly and pause in the middle while it's still clicking. This will allow the ratchet to lock in place so that your extension cord isn't constantly trying to self-retract back up into the ceiling. So plug it in, blow any sawdust off of the bed so that you have a pristine surface, and then we'll set the height. My raw material is 1 inch and 1/16 of an inch. Yours might be different, so you've really got to set the height appropriately for your material. What's appropriate? Well, you're looking to cut off almost nothing at all for the very first pass. So set your height such that this gauge over here, the top flat line of that red gauge, lands on the mark 1/16 of an inch above what you've measured your material to be. I measured mine at 1 inch and 1/16, so I'm going to set my initial pass at 1 1/8. All right, turn the machine on and then look at this control over here, especially this line that reads shift only when machine is running. That should be set to 1, the slow mode, so that we don't risk as beginners overburdening the machine. Great. Finally, load your flat side down and scoot your material in until you feel the first roller grab onto it, and then let go and let the machine take it from there. And you can walk around to the outfeed side to see what you got. Notice how even though I set my height higher than I had measured my stock to be, the machine still took off quite a bit of material. This is why you want to set your initial height higher than you think. Now look at your top face. I took off most of the lumber mill saw marks, but here some remain, and so I'm going to send it through the planer again. And I'm only going to turn the crank half a turn, lowering the planer 1/32 of an inch, and then I'm going to send it through again. After each pass, I'm going to measure the thickness of my material, watching it approach my target dimension. And for us, this picture frame will work at several different dimensions, so the target is arbitrary. But let's say it was 1 inch. I'm currently reading at 1 inch and 1/32 of an inch, and so I have capacity to come down one more half turn on the wheel. And I need it because I still have rough saw marks on the top of my face. So turn the crank 1/2 turn and send your material through one more time, removing that final 32nd of an inch, and measure it to confirm that I really have landed here at 1 inch on the dot. The important bit is that you take off all the rough saw marks, so that if you end up at 15/16 of an inch or 7/8 of an inch, don't worry, you can still proceed. Okay, power down, take the dust collector hose off, close the dust collector gate, unplug and give the extension cord a little tug to let it retract back up into the ceiling, and wheel the machine back off to the side of the shop. Take note of how now you have one flat surface, a second flat surface at 90 degrees to it, and now a third flat surface that is guaranteed to be parallel to the first. Next up, we're going to rip it on the table saw, and when we do, we will have done what is commonly referred to as squaring up the stock. Now we have 4 sides that are pristine and square to each other and ready for all of the other wood joinery techniques that might follow.